This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 13th of February 2024 at home in Wicklow. And in it, amongst other things, I talk about Valentine's Day, romance, departing guinea pigs, and why Ireland might not be such a great place to be or to stay. That's the first little part of the episode, and then most of the episode is taken up with two other topics. One is me talking about writing and my writing process and how I try to find the writing voice that I like. And that was sort of that line of thinking, and that topic was prompted by a great little stay I had only last week at a writer's retreat up in Northern Ireland. So I talk more about that. And also I talk in some detail about the 1968 film The Lion in Winter, because I watched that while I was away as well and really enjoyed it. And it I had to draw a certain connection to people quite close to me upon the conclusion of that film. So stay tuned. Okay, that's what's coming up. I hope you enjoy it. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind. Leaving the dream behind. Keep my moji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. Welcome to the third week of February. That's just begun, hasn't it? How are you? Did you do anything nice for Valentine's Day? Were you thinking of love? Or is the type of love that we're sold on Valentine's Day absolute garbage, rubbish? Is it complete crap? Maybe. At the time of recording, it's not quite Valentine's Day. I feel there's not going to be much action in #blessed, where I reside with my wife and daughter and the cats and the chickens and the dog. Did I tell you? Did I tell you that we we are without guinea pigs? The guinea pigs have gone. Did I mention this already? I can't remember. It's, since Christmas they've gone. My wife was very diligent and vetted potential new homes. Eventually it was just one, because I think maybe one person expressed interest and then never followed up, and then another person expressed interest, and they were a good fit for the two brothers. The two butt-sniffing, popcorning brothers, Shaggy and Leo. And they are gone, baby, gone. They are residing not a million miles from here, with a family with many children, from young to old. I think it was one of the older children that was interested in having them as pets. So what can I tell you? Their loss has not been felt keenly. We were glad to be rid of them, and it just wasn't a good quality of life for them. Don't get me wrong, they were very well looked after, but they sort of gradually moved from centre stage and just a little bit further to the wings, and then basically they fetched up in the props closet, the utility room in their quarters, just doing circles, sniffing each other's butts, getting fed, getting excited, popcorning. I'll remind you, popcorning is the word. It's the guinea pig word for when guinea pigs get very excited and jump. Little, not quite alley-oops, but they jump, almost like a sprung toy bouncing off the floor. And that's what they do, and they make little warbly, churbly, gerbily sounds, almost like R2-D2. So, on that level I could always enjoy them, but they weren't particularly interested or interesting. They're not. They I mean, I don't know. I don't know what relationship people have with guinea pigs. I was always quite neutral on them. My daughter had phases of interest until almost no interest was the norm. And my poor old wife was the one who did most of the caring for them and cleaning of their quarters. I used to feed them every morning a little plate of nibbles, and I would procure those nibbles from a local pet shop. But yeah, Shaggy and Leo. Bon voyage, mes amis. Safe journey, little hairy popcorning friends. They're gone. Yes. So why did that come up? Why was I referring to the denizens of? Oh yeah, Valentine's Day. The denizens of #blessed. I mean, what's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? My wife has virtually no interest in romance. Is that a brutal thing to say? Particularly that type of romance, the Valentine's Day hard sell, and endless red cards and love hearts and teddy bears and roses. We see through it for what it is, the scam. My daughter is more interested, just because my daughter lives my daughter lives for events. What are we doing today? So what's the plan tomorrow? What are we doing tomorrow? And today, in fact, at the time of recording, it's Pancake Tuesday. So last night she was like, we're having pancakes for breakfast. You're making pancakes. And I'm like, well, there's no lemon because you drank all the lemons, squeezy lemons, those little plastic lemons. My daughter has a fondness for squeezing extravagant and multiple squirts of lemon into a glass of water. So I go to get lemon for pancakes, and there's none in the press, the cupboard. The larder was bare. So I said, well, I'm not doing pancakes because you had all the lemon. And she was very concerned. And I said, I'll make pancakes, don't worry. But it'll be fresh grapefruit juice instead of lemon and maple. Anyway, she just had chocolate spread on hers. And she was happy. I dropped her to school, and she tried to steal one of my hats, one of my beanies, one of my woolly hats, one that had been given to me for my birthday by my friend Ian. So this is a Polish hat that I'm quite fond of. And I saw my daughter skittering across our yard with the hat on. I said, no, that hat is staying here because I'll be wearing it today. I wear it as I record. So she had a row with me in the car about that and gave out about terrible 80s style and just went on a rant about how terrible I am and, my wife is. And I had sympathy for her position in general. And I just said at the time in her life when she is most interested in having fun and changing things up and making things interesting and diverting and keeping things fresh, my wife and I are probably enduring one of the most stressful periods of our life, and we're not feeling that joy, that spontaneity, that carefreeness. We are feeling embattled and worn out and just wrecked, I think, from and by the way, I'm not trying to single myself and my wife out for special consideration. I think this is just an aspect or a facet of middle age. It's definitely an aspect of living in Ireland at this time and the cost of trying to sustain just a baseline acceptable standard of living, and particularly if you come from our backgrounds. Artistic, creative, freelance backgrounds. It's a juggle. It's a dance, and things get very spiky at times. So I was just kind of laying that out for my daughter. She loves my lectures. She loves my reality checks. And anyway, she left at the car with her own hat, reluctantly, threatening to throw it in a bin. it's so funny to see her walk through the little railing gate, a sort of what kind of gate? A hinged gate that allows one person to pass through at a time. They were put in that school when I attended there a million years ago. I spent, I think, my last 2 years of primary school in that school when it was brand new, which must have been around 84, 85, roughly. I would have finished up in July, end of June 86, I think would have been the end of my time there. So it's funny seeing my daughter walk through the same kind of, the style, and then up the steps to the school. It's quite the trip. It's funny. I mean, and like, I'm sure I've mentioned it before. I mean, what is it now? Mid-February. So we're back in Ireland almost 4 years. And yesterday I had a lovely walk up in the hills, up in the mountain with my good friend Will, who was one of my best buds in primary school. We've reconnected very strongly since moving back, because he lives just up the road, and in fact accommodated us when we arrived desperately, absolutely, spent when we arrived back in Ireland at the start of the pandemic, and all those lockdown conditions were there, and he put us up on his property, which was an absolute godsend. I'll always be grateful for that. But the point I'm making is, this thing of kind of reconnecting with people you knew in childhood, and we were descending the mountain and passed an old classmate of mine. She was walking up the hill with one of her daughters. She's also a recently returned emigre. She'd been in England and came back a couple of years ago to the area. It's kind of nice. It is kind of nice, just to be reminded of the connections and the roots, and in spite of things having been kind of challenging enough for lots of different reasons over the last few years, and the pandemic was definitely part of that. Not exactly a great entry point to be negotiating the pandemic as you relocate from the other side of the world. We were, a reminder if you're a new listener, we were in Melbourne for 10 years, where my wife was born but didn't live for very long as a child. She lived in different parts of Australia. But it's been, it's I haven't regretted coming back. Although there are certain kind of directions Ireland is moving in, are really fundamental social problems, particularly around the area of housing and healthcare, and social sort of support and government support. These are not strong areas, and I think the kind of ongoing government mismanagement and sort of cowardice and failure to implement a sustainable vision, and giving into larger corporate interests, it just, that can become very dispiriting. And I have found myself for the first time wondering, should we be here at all long term? Should we consider not staying in Ireland? Which is hard. That doesn't fill me with any pleasure, but for the first time in the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of thinking, if this country can't actually look after people and provide pathways to stability, real stability, social stability, and sustainable housing and healthcare solutions, I don't know. It's these aren't small things. These are not small things, and I despair at the general direction the country is moving in, and I certainly feel, my wife and I, we'd be vulnerable. We'd be vulnerable to that climate and those pressures, and I just think we've reached a point in our lives where we have no tolerance, no tolerance for it, and not much in the way of, I don't know, a very compromised sort of resilience. Anyway, I'm speaking a little bit cryptically, and this isn't coming from nowhere, but I'll stop because that's all sounding a bit too negative, which I didn't really want to get stuck on that. What did I want to talk about today? I don't know. I'll give you a weather report because that's important. It's important to know what we're dealing with here in the Emerald Isle. Of course, if you're local, you know what it is. It is damp. It's just one of those windless, steady drizzles. I think last week I gave you a weather report as well. It was heavier rain, but this is just drizzle. It's just this very quiet, still, constant dampening of everything. It's kind of lovely. The grass is covered in moisture. The sky is white. It's just one enormous cloud. I was in swimming earlier. After I dropped my daughter to school, I hit the recycling centre and then put myself in the water for the first time in about 6 days. It felt really cold. It felt like there was a lot of fresh water in the sea, which always drops the temperature. But I was in for over 10 minutes, which I was impressed with myself for that. It's probably again, my sources tell me it was just over 8 degrees Celsius. It felt colder than that to me. But yeah, always good for you, always good. I never regret getting in the water. And in fact, only yesterday, somebody connected to my Thursday night football game threw up a link to a nice little article from one of the footballing guys who sadly hasn't played with us for a good while. And I had no idea. This is the way it goes with football. This is so typical of men. It's just a group of guys, from probably mid-30s to mid-50s. We play on a Thursday night, 5 or 6 aside game of soccer, the round ball game, football, on an artificial pitch, AstroTurf, outdoors, all weather, for an hour, and it's very, very enjoyable. And I'm sure I've mentioned this before. Quite, sort of an always improving standard of football. Some really good players there, and guys who've played in the past. And then guys like me who just try to make up for a lack of skill with fitness and effort and kind of commitment. But in any case, some of those guys know each other from, the local area. The area's not particularly local to me. It's about a 35-minute drive from here for me. But you just turn up and play. That's it. That's the focus. Turn up and play. Have a bit of banter, maybe during, maybe after the game. But you're not kind of asking each other, so what do you do? Where do you live? Are you married? How many children do you have? And in fact, I bumped into one of the regular guys who I often have a good laugh with. One of the last midterm breaks, we both found ourselves watching, what was that movie? Oh, it was terrible. Trolls, and one of those Trolls movies. Trolls 3, 4, I can't even remember how many there were. It was absolutely appalling. Anyway, he was there with his 2 children. I was there with Maeve, my daughter. And I said hello to him in there. That was grand. And then afterwards, I said hello again. I had a bit of chat, and it was almost like he's like, "No, we're not meant to interact. We just play football together." He wasn't, he wasn't been. There was no hostility, or he wasn't giving me a vibe, but I could just tell. Okay, I was kind of like, "Hello, I'm Dara," introducing myself to his children, and anyway, it was funny. But in any case, one of the guys, the guy I just mentioned, who hasn't played with us for a long time, I just found out recently because of this link. Another one of the guys threw up. He's a counsellor and psychotherapist, and he put up this lovely article on his website about the benefits of cold water swimming and how it stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve. I'm an idiot. I constantly come across social media posts advocating or explaining the vagus nerve and the benefits of understanding what that vagus nerve does. And I always glance and read, oh yeah. And then I walk away going, I haven't really taken in what that is, the vagus nerve. I saw something online just the other day with there's a very good psychologist on Instagram. She calls herself the holistic psychologist and puts up lots of really interesting tidbits, and she has a very successful book, and she was just demonstrating that the vagus nerve can be stimulated in by putting your fingers in your kind of lower ear hole and applying a bit of pressure, and it'll instantly contribute to de-stressing and calming down. And fundamentally, in that article on the cold water swimming, the writer, the counsellor and psychotherapist, that's what he was saying as well. The vagus nerve gets activated, and it's obviously connected to various, chemicals and internal responses in the brain, and yeah, lots of nice things. Anyway, there you go. I have shared no information of value there. You're going, just find out what the vagus nerve is, idiot. Yeah, so there you go. Look, I am going to just share some thoughts on the lovely time I had last week. I was very lucky to go up and spend a few days in County Down in the River Mill Writers Retreat. Fantastic place, owned and run by Paul Maddern. Very nice man, a poet, a former dancer, former kind of catering sector, restaurant guy working in that sector, not as a chef, but lots of stories, and a very well published and celebrated poet in his own right. And he just has this lovely place set up near Downpatrick, and a friend of ours put us onto it. My wife booked me a stay there, and it was just fantastic. It was so lovely, and part of the deal is that it's catered, so Paul comes in and cooks twice a day. Lots of gorgeous food, lots of it. I just found, oh God, I can't keep eating. It's all delicious, but I can't find the place to put it. But it was really, really lovely, and my different thoughts. One is that you step into a place and the energy just feels right. The ambience, the way the place is laid out. You're just stepping into this zone where everything feels so conducive to achieving the purpose of the place, which is to have that downtime, that quiet time, that concentration time to write, to work in such a peaceful environment, and time to think, to reflect, to try and access the creative juices, and it just felt luxurious in terms of the energy, the headspace that it gifted me. And I happened to be there by myself the first couple of nights. Paul himself doesn't live in the house, so that was even, on one level, even nicer. Even though I had been looking forward to maybe some company just for talking about writing and whatnot. Although Paul and I had some great conversations in that area. He was also a former film student, so we were talking movies, and he had a lovely selection of DVDs. And I did find myself succumbing to that impulse, and I watched and very much enjoyed again, for the first time in an awfully long time, 1968's The Lion in Winter, with Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn, amongst others. I'll return to that momentarily, but it was great, and it definitely achieved the purpose. I got to sit down with the blank page, so to speak, on the laptop, and I didn't really know what I was going to write. I had a bit of anxiety heading up there, because I just was like, I know I write, I can write, I do write, but I haven't been writing lately. I didn't do much writing at all last year, maybe even the previous year, the last couple of years. And I've mentioned at different times my desire or aspiration to try and at some point produce something long form. And I've been kind of in my mind, and I've had very little headspace for this anyway, and just been busy with life and just really hard to carve out the time to do it. But, in my mind, I've been prevaricating, every time this thought crosses the threshold of my mind, I've been prevaricating, going, like, what is it? Like, what is the thing? What do I want to try and explore? What do I want to write? And what form should it take? Should I stay with what I've written mostly, and certainly what I've shared most publicly is more sort of think pieces, personal reflections, personal storytelling, a focus on, what I talk about here on the podcast, a focus on emotional, psychological well-being, an ongoing focus on the internal landscape, on interiority, on that experience, the negotiation of self, the negotiation of identity, how we try to carve out that sense of rightness, in terms of how we're sort of, I don't mean right as in I'm right, you're wrong, but right as in how we're oriented correctly for ourselves in the universe, in the world. How we reconcile the inner striving or the inner disposition, the inner reckoning, how we reconcile that with the uncontrollables, how we reconcile that with the outside external realities that rarely accommodate us, that are uninterested and disinterested in what we care about and what we feel we need and what we want to do. And I think the objective, if we're talking about trying to be happy, and I rarely speak about happy because, being happy as an objective, I find a very limited idea. And wellness has been kind of traduced by so many, but by just an over sort of proliferation of people like me, different kind of wellness advocates and life coaches and wellness influencers, and so much of that takes place in the social media realm and on our little devices and screens. And my well-established position is that I'm very, very dubious about an awful lot of that stuff. Now, you can cherry pick, as I have done, and you find, 2 or 3 or 4 people, you go, yeah, I like their thing. It's coming from a real place. But as I say, my conviction is the successful cultivation of a resilient wellness is very much connected to this reconciling of the inner and the outer, the private self and the public self, the inward facing and the outward facing, and it's tricky. And my assumption is everyone is doing this on some level. I've chosen, with my life choices, I've chosen to spend a lot of time thinking in this area. I've now spent a lot of time, over 10 years, presenting those thoughts, those reactions, those responses, that thinking. I've spent over 10 years presenting that in a public way, first with the website, the blog, and now with the weekly podcast, which what's this, episode 143, so for 143 weeks in a row I've been stepping a toe into this. Now I know there's been a lot of other things that I've spoken about, and obviously my interest in films comes up again and again, and sometimes, so often episodes aren't particularly reflective or introspective, but often I'll connect certain thoughts or thinking to movies I've seen, or what they've triggered in me or made me think about. So in any case, I was travelling up on Wednesday of last week, and just trying not to put myself under any pressure, trying to go, no, don't worry, you'll think of something, just get your arse up there and just see what feels right. And that's a general rule of thumb for me. I'll go on that kind of what feels right, what's gonna, just that's based on a sort of an intuition, a gut feeling, but also a listening to myself, and a sort of unwieldy, ungraspable, process of trust and faith that something will come, that things will settle, that the muddy glass will become clear. And on the evening I arrived, I was just too wrecked. I was like, I just decided I'm not going to put myself under pressure to sit down and, be brilliant right now and produce something, because, as I said, I didn't have a starting point. And also I had a new laptop, so any kind of bits and pieces I'd written, I had transferred a lot of my kind of Word docs and beginnings of things, and a couple of thousand words here, a couple of thousand words there. They were all sitting on a hard drive behind in Wicklow. I didn't bring it with me. An oversight on my part, but also I've thought, look, don't worry about it, let's just see where you go. Anyway, one thing I don't have a problem with is getting up early, and I knew I was going to do that. I knew I was going to get up early and go to bed reasonably early and try and maximise that early morning time and the first half of the day time for being productive. So I was out in the garden doing my usual thing, my kind of qigong, stretching, breathing exercises, and I just got that clarity the next morning at 5 a.m, in the dark, wrapped up, hatted and gloved and scarved, and going through the moves. And I got the clarity on what I was going to try and begin writing anyway. And fundamentally, what it was I was like, I'll continue exploring my journey from childhood to adult, continue exploring the journey from inner to outer, and try and depict that and capture that in a way that feels interesting, easy to read, relatable, in a way that my voice wants to express it. And that was how I began. And I did a little bit on, the Thursday and the Friday, and again up on Saturday morning very early to try and do a bit more. And I managed to do a bit every day. And it was a really useful time and a really useful exercise. And one thing that I came away with that I thought was really useful was just a very clear sense of voice. And I mean like a writing voice, the type of voice that felt to me more alive, more dynamic, lighter, had more sort of energy in it. And some of what I wrote, I feel, was successful in that area, and that's definitely a voice I like. And then I'd find myself getting bogged down, and my brain or whatever the writing impulse was would take me to a different place. And I was kind of going, what is this? What is this change? Because I'm not enjoying myself. I'm not enjoying producing these words. These are heavy and ponderous and maybe a little bit pompous, and I'm sort of above it and not in it. And it took me the 2.5 to 3 days to sort of go, oh, okay, this is what's happening. I see. I can feel the sort of the balloon coming down to earth. I can feel the weight of the writing sinking into the mud. So I was doing quite a lot of editing and, excisions, ripping out, paragraphs that I felt, no, I don't need this. And, in that sort of kill your darlings spirit. But maybe these are not darlings if I'm like, get the hell off my page. Anyway, so look, that's just my bit of reportage of the process and what went on at the River Mill Writers Retreat. So thanks again to Paul for a really lovely time, a lovely experience, and thanks to my wife for getting me up there. And if I'm still doing this, and if I'm still making those attempts to write and produce something that might fill a book, you can be sure I will let you know. But it was an interesting experience just to retread some childhood ground and cast myself into that world again, the world of childhood memory, and just trying to be deft in how I described certain experiences and certain moments, as I try to maybe establish currents and themes that will carry that narrative up to the present moment. And I mean, I think ultimately my objective is the sort of revelation of and exploration of my own sort of interiority, and drawing connections between that and external struggles, outward struggles, and in the hope that will be something that would be interesting to people, in the hope that it might be, I mean, it's highly unlikely that you'd produce something that hasn't been written about before, but maybe you might, I won't say you, I mean me, I'm hoping there might be something in the way I write about things that will be intriguing enough, or maybe even refreshing enough to attract a readership. He says, after producing 7 or 8 pages of writing. Anyway, to be continued at some point in the future. So to return to The Lion in Winter, and I feel I was speaking about this movie before Christmas because it came up in the Sylvester Stallone documentary, and Stallone made it very clear that The Lion in Winter was one of his favourite movies, and it was very clear watching the documentary that the reason it was one of his favourite movies was because it was all about fathers and sons, and sons craving the love and validation and approval of the father, who was a very slippery, treacherous, self-absorbed character, and a parent with a callous disregard for the feelings and needs of his grown-up children. And that was very clear that had huge resonance for Stallone and his own childhood and his own relationship with his father, who was clearly a tricky character and very competitive with his son, and was still trying to dominate Sylvester Stallone as an older man. There's a story of a polo match in the Stallone documentary, and the father, I don't know, did he crack Stallone over the head with the mallet or just crash into him on the horse? It was pretty unsavoury stuff. You're like, oh lads, really? Like that, that type of combative and desperate masculinity, the desire to dominate another man, and when that's coming from an older man towards his adult son, who at that stage, in Stallone's case, had enormous success. Yeah, it's very, I don't know. I'm not trying to judge it. I'm not clutching my pearls, because ultimately it always makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, you haven't let go of that sense of yourself. Your sense of power is still located in that area. I'm the alpha. I'm going to dominate. I will not lose face. Everyone will see that I'm the man. I worry about guys like that, and I worry about their reluctance or inability to be vulnerable, to accept a certain diminishment, to accept being less than. And I think for any of us, we all have to negotiate that on some level, whether male or female. That's just part of life. It's part of aging. It's part of experiencing failure and disappointment. It's part of compromise, but it's also part of like maturation. It's also part of just growing up. It's also part of coming to peace with yourself. So hopefully you can take those disappointments and failures and contextualize them, put perspective on them, and process them in a way that's not detrimental to your sense of self, your self-worth. But yeah, in any case, the Lion in Winter, it's a great watch, directed by Anthony Harvey. And it was a kind of a Peter O'Toole production. He was very centrally involved in casting and, giving it the green light it needed. Scored by John Barry, who did the James Bond music, in this kind of almost sub-exorcist kind of motif, sort of dramatic choral stuff, but effective and interesting and evocative, and shot by Douglas Slocum in, again, just this very, like, using a lot of, it looked like using a lot of natural light and getting the most out of available light. And certainly there's a sequence early on in the film where Katharine Hepburn playing Eleanor of Aquitaine, the wife of Henry II, Peter O'Toole's character, who's been locked up in a tower by him but she's released for special events, and she's been brought up the river on a suitable ship, rowed by several oarsmen. And there's just this, the photography of the arrival of the ship and the progress of the ship along the river, with trees on the riverbank in the background and the prow advancing across the screen and the sound of the water. Really, really effective, really beautiful. And there are other shots that are like, again, I'll betray my art history ignorance, but they feel like, I don't know, maybe pastoral scenes from Belgian artists of the 1600s or 1500s. Just that mixture of natural earthy tones and peasant activity, rural activity. And there are just a few shots in the film that kind of tap into that as well, because much of the film takes place indoors, inside the walls and rooms of this castle, where Henry has assembled everyone for Christmas. This film is sometimes included in people's lists of great Christmas movies. Now it depends what you're after in a Christmas movie. I'm very much on the record here on this podcast in terms of my own relationship to Christmas movies. I like something Christmassy. And Christmassy in the best sense. I'm drawn towards the sentimental and stories of uplift and stories of transformation and salvation, not in a deeply religious sense, but just I like those narratives at Christmas. I like the kind of the hero journey, epitomized by James Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life and what he goes through as George Bailey. But the simple truth is, of course, Christmases and Christmas gatherings, and particularly Christmas family gatherings, can be hellish events, fraught with vendetta and resentment and anger and bad behaviour and outbursts and drunkenness and what have you, undercurrents of deep familial anxiety and rivalry, and as I said, vendetta is this kind of score settling vibe, and this the kind of foment of unrest, emotional turmoil, the raging torrents of that turmoil under the surface constantly. And The Lion in Winter, if you remove the historical trappings and don't try and subject it to the historical accuracy test, and just think of it as a soap opera, a family drama with two incredibly sort of enmeshed parents who have serious scores to settle with each other, and then three power-hungry sons, with different levels of desert and competence, but everyone sort of frothing at the bit to move their respective chess pieces on the board to achieve their ends. And it's such a dance of a movie. And then there's, the two other main characters apart from Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn as the king and queen, and the three sons, who I'll get to in a second. The other two main characters are the young French prince, played by a very young and slippery and svelte Timothy Dalton. Again, he looks very theatrical, just the style of his look and his facial hair and his eyes, kind of a striking looking young man. But there's him, and then there's the Peter O'Toole's young mistress who he claims he is going to marry. So he wants to annul his marriage to Katharine Hepburn's queen to marry this young Alice. I've just gone blank on the actress's name. So she's also trying to kind of negotiate this, and she, more than anyone, is, you know, a pawn in the game of people with far more power than she has. But it's just a great entertainment. It's quite theatrical and stagey. I think, was it adapted from a stage play? You could just see so many of the scenes just playing out on stage. And Katharine Hepburn and Peter O'Toole are just tearing it up. Hepburn at that point was about 61, and still really did look great and had great sort of energy and presence and poise, all the things she would have been known for, and just a great command of language and tone and cadence, and intent. But in a way, Peter O'Toole is still, after all these years, he's still the revelation. He, at that time, I think was only 36 perhaps. He'd done Lawrence of Arabia about 6 years earlier, so he was like 36 or 38, and he's playing the aging king. And in this case, in the story of the movie, that meant he was 50 and bemoaning the onset of decrepitude and old age. And to look at him, he wasn't in particularly aged makeup, but just the way he used his body. And there would have been a little bit of work done into his face, but he was very credible. He was very credible as a peer of Katharine Hepburn's, even though she would have been like an older queen, I think, to his younger king. But he didn't feel that far away from her in age, and he has a beard, and he's not in any way glamorous and matinee idol styled as he was for Lawrence of Arabia, where his physical beauty was such a key component of the effectiveness of that film. Here he's wearing kind of very dark toned, big woolly garments, to keep warm in this cold castle, and it's really his emotional furnace that keeps things hot. And again, just the fluidity of his performance, the dexterity of his line readings, and his emotional dexterity as he negotiates the different beats of the story and the different relationships he has with his sons, and just the energy that he can bring, the vocal power and the physical energetic power he can bring to a moment, to a scene. Absolutely brilliant. And the three sons, the most famous of the three sons cast was Anthony Hopkins. Was his first screen role, and his lovely Welsh tones are very discernible anytime he speaks. And again, his innate strength and presence as an actor, just clearly there to be enjoyed. And then the other actors were, I'm gonna fail on this test. And I was looking at the biographies of these actors. They were very good as well. Was it Nigel Terry? Was he the kind of young buffoony youngest son, really completely hapless? And then there was the cold, scheming son. And I have gone blank on his name. He was a John. I'd have to look it up. I might look it up just while I'm talking here, because he was very good as well, and a very different energy to the other actors, a very different energy to O'Toole, and a type, an archetype. The scheming, cold, quiet son, Machiavellian, regarding everything, constantly calculating and assessing, and a great look. Okay, I'm trying to remember now who it was. I'm going to tell you now in 2 seconds. Yeah, John Castle. Again, I think it might have been his first film as well. And he and Anthony Hopkins were pals. I think they might have been in acting school together. So a lot of fun was being had on set. If you look at the sort of commentary that goes with the movie, or the interviews with the cast, Katharine Hepburn giving Anthony Hopkins acting tips. Don't do anything. Just be yourself. You've got the face, you've got the voice, you've got the physical presence. You don't have to add. Just say the lines basically. And yeah, it's all there. Hopkins was playing Richard, who would become Richard the Lionheart. So these are all based on historical figures. So it's just this great melodramatic romp, and just a family at war. And what Katharine Hepburn and Peter O'Toole do so effectively is make you believe in their love, their ages-old love, and these young people around them scrambling for power and favour. They're just like bothersome flies or gnats or bees, and they're engaging with them because they have to. It's an obligation, and there are things that have to happen and have to be done and have to be observed. And what you get is the sense of they're just a source of annoyance. And even the young French king, who O'Toole as the king patronisingly addresses as boy 2 or 3 times to explosive effect. But what lasts from the film really is the strength of their relationship. Henry and Eleanor, as embodied by Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn, and that's coming from the actors as well, who were friends in real life, and their chemistry was excellent. And the final scene in the film is, after a very, very dramatic night where it could have all ended in bloodshed, and the sons were thrown into a dungeon and then freed by Katharine Hepburn. So there's a big, row and high stakes negotiation with the raging Peter O'Toole and his sons. But somehow the night passes, and Peter O'Toole is escorting, in great good humour, Katharine Hepburn back to her boat to be returned to her tower, and they're just flirting with each other and joking that, and this is as Katharine Hepburn is now on the boat and departing down the river, and Peter O'Toole is just kind of roaring at her from the shore, perhaps we should just outlive them all, and kind of give them nothing, and we'll be the only 2 left. And he's just roaring with laughter from the shore. And it is theatrical, it's a bit cheesy, it's a bit over the top, and yet Katharine Hepburn meets it and it works because they're great actors. They make you believe it. And it really is. It's a great watch. And just that final scene it just had me reflecting on my own parents, and just thinking of what they've had to put up with over the years. I'm one of 4 sons, and there have been lots of, if not Christmases, although there have been some, various family events and gatherings and dramas and, explosive moments. I've been guilty of some of those myself, and it's all it's all in the mix of, and it depends where you come from. It depends what your family situation is. But there's nothing straightforward about my family, and there's a great vying for, power is not the right word, but I don't know, justice, it feels at times, the righting of wrongs, the airing of grievances, and it's been volatile over the years, over our lifetimes, and certainly as I got older, that all cooled, and you get a bit more distance and a bit more perspective. And of course, this comes back to the idea of maturation and dealing with your own stuff and putting down that accusatory, blaming, pointing finger and accepting, not much is going to change here. I'll just try and get on with my own process, my own work on myself, and my and my parents have behaved like Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn at times. In The Lion in Winter, there has been kind of evident, demonstrated, palpable disregard for their sons and what we care about, what we're interested in, and that's individual. I'm not trying to say we have a collective need. It's all individual stuff. Everyone has their own issues, but they have behaved in a totally self-interested way, with absolutely no care for the consequences on myself or my brothers. Brats. And I've one or two episodes in my head. I needn't bother share them now, but there was just this sort of moment of resonance, of connection, which was how The Lion in Winter ended, and that sense of them regarding their children as just inconvenient idiots. And let's just get on with our own thing, our own dynamic, and they're on their own. And maybe that speaks to many adult parents of adult children who are like, yeah, I get it. Okay, that's it. I'm done. The drizzle has remained constant. No change, no deviation. It really is quite lovely. Okay, so that was it. That was episode 143. You're so good if you came and listened and stayed for my thoughts on my own writing process and my thoughts on The Lion in Winter. And whatever else I was talking about at the bottom. I don't listen to myself, and I expect you to listen. That's rude, isn't it? Or is that just what we all do on some level? All right, I'm gone. You can, as always, throw me love, baby. Throw me love on social media. The Clear Out podcast is on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. They're mainly where I am. So if you want to throw a comment, throw a recommend, rate the podcast somewhere, give a review somewhere, that all helps. And if you're really into this thing that I do, you can throw hard-earned shekels my way. Hard-earned dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. And that would be most welcome indeed. That would be brilliant. That's quite the validation. Otherwise, I'll just keep on validating myself. Dara, you're a good one. Keep the faith. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with something else. One other thing. I'm back at the Irish Museum of Modern Art on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock. I'll be there for the next month and a half, doing the mindfulness training, really is what it is. It's mindfulness instruction I call it The Receptive Mind, and it takes place at Camerino Bakery at the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Kilmainham, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Before Christmas it was 11 a.m. So that lunchtime slot, 12 p.m. It's about a 50-minute class, 12 p.m. to about 10 to 1. Love to see you there. You can drop in. You don't need to book. Bring a pal. Bring many pals. And yeah, you'll have a good experience, I'm sure of it. And I'll give you tools to help you keep your head on and keep calm and feel grounded and in control of what you've got. That's all very welcome stuff, I believe. Okay, take it easy. Thanks again for listening. Mind yourselves. All the best. Bye.